Hey, welcome to Running on Reddit. Your host, Zach. This week we have stories from ProRevenge. Let's get into it. This happened when I was in college, back in 2011. I lived in a 4-story dorm that was all guys, about 40 to 60 guys per floor. Each floor had one laundry room, with 3 washers and 3 dryers, plus cubbies to store your laundry bag and soap while you were washing. A few months into the semester, I noticed my laundry detergent was disappearing faster than it should be. Not a huge deal, but mildly annoying. What made it a bigger deal was that whoever was stealing my detergent would also take my clothes out of the washer and leave them on the floor so that they could wash their own clothing. This pushed me over the line. I would typically do a load while I went to class, not classes, so this made finding the perp tricky. Then a golden idea hit me. I went to Walmart and bought a new jug of laundry detergent, the same brand I always get, but I also bought extra strength bleach. I poured half the detergent from the new bottle into my old bottle and replaced it with the extra strength bleach. That next day, I did my laundry as usual, but left the new and improved detergent in the cubby instead of my regular stuff. Then I waited. After class, sure enough, my clothes were sitting in a pile on the floor, soaking wet, and the whole laundry room smelled of bleach. Just what I wanted. Fast forward to the next week, every Monday night we had floor meetings, where basically we talked about the rules and everything going on as a floor. In walks the guy, we'll call him Bob, wearing a newly bleached hoodie and ruined jeans. Bob drops his pile of ruined clothes on the floor and starts spouting off about how someone owed him money for his ruined clothes. The whole floor burst out in laughter. Apparently, I wasn't the only one Bob was stealing soap from. He didn't get another sentence out of his mouth before our RA told him stealing detergent was still a crime, so it was his own fault. Enjoy your breached clothes, Bob. So I've never been in a dorm before, but it seems like using someone else's materials is not a good idea. It's like against common courtesy. Is it a crime? I'm not sure. If anyone else knows, let me know in the comment section below. And I was going through the comments on this post. I actually found another story which is quite interesting. A crappy apartment I lived in back in the early 2000s had storage units and laundry in the basement. One day, I was rummaging around in my storage unit when I saw a neighbor girl come down and put her load of clothes in the dryer, put some coins in, and leave. A little bit later, another scumbag neighbor came down. He stopped the dryer cycle, took her clothes out, and threw them on the ground. Then he took his stuff out of another washing machine and stuck it in the dryer that the girl had just paid for. And then he left. Well, this calls for a little vigilante justice. I had a few bottles of liquid stink spray. If you've ever experienced it, you know that just a tiny little squirt can clear a room. I went and dumped an entire bottle all over his clothes so that it could get well and truly baked in. I went back down and checked the basement a few hours later, and the guy's clothes were piled in the trash, reeking like a pit toilet. The dryer still smelled pretty bad, so I put $1 in and let it run on empty. It aired out fine, so no one else had to suffer. To those who are commenting, why didn't I just switch them back out, or why did I leave her clothes on the floor? I mainly wanted to ruin the guy's stuff in the hopes that he'd be scared to ever do this again. And also, if I had moved her clothes, and if I had moved her clothing, it would have looked like she had done it. And I know that he knew who she was because the time between her leaving and him entering was maybe 10 seconds. Unless you took off at a full sprint, there's no way you could be out of the line of sight of anyone walking towards the basement steps in that amount of time. I first got to college my freshman year and met the dorm leader, RA at most schools. Like most colleagues, the dorm leader was the upperclassman that lived in the dorms and monitored the freshman halls. My dorm leader's name was Julio, fake name by the way, and at first, he seemed like a nice dude that minded his own business. He talked about how he would stay out of everyone's business if we would stay out of his. Also, he tried to be the cool dorm leader and always mentioned to me about how he drank tons of alcohol his freshman year in the dorms. He gave off the impression he really didn't care if we ever drank in our dorm rooms, but to just keep it on the low if we did. I really didn't drink much at all, but I appreciated the fact that he seemed pretty normal and didn't try to rat on kids. During the last week of October of my freshman year of college, I had one of the hardest weeks of my academic career. I was a biochemistry major, taking some pretty tough classes, and had 3 exams that week. At the end of the week, a friend I had recently made down the hall invited me to his dorm room to watch an upcoming NBA game. As we were watching the game, he had a bottle of vodka and gave some to the guys in the dorm. Being a naive and stupid freshman kid just trying to make some friends, I took 1 shot of vodka and continued to watch the game. As we were watching the game, one of the guys in the dorm spills a bottle of soda and rushes to the bathroom to grab some paper towels. As he walks out of the dorm room, Julio walked by and noticed the bottle of vodka. He laughed, said something of the sorts of, "I remember when I was a freshman, ha ha ha, just try and keep it down." We thanked him and told him to have a good night. It seemed like a normal conversation and nothing out of the ordinary. 30 minutes later, we hear a knock on the door, and 2 policemen showed up with breathalyzers. They told us they had received a complaint from Julio about underage drinking and a party being thrown in the dorm room. Remember, it was 3 guys watching a Lakers game on a Thursday night at 8 p.m. I ended up getting a minor in consumption charge for blowing a .02. Had to do 20 hours of community service, a reflection journal, and appear to the Judicial Affairs Center at my college about my supposed drinking problem. I'm not blaming the officer for giving me a ticket, but I was pretty upset with Julio, who always talked about getting trashed freshman year in the dorm, called the police right after he essentially gave us the okay for the night. A few weeks later, I see Julio and straight up asked him why he decided to rat me out. Specifically, I asked why he didn't just tell me to head back to my dorm if he had a problem with the alcohol, instead of calling the police right after our conversation. He responds word for word with, "You made a decision and had to suffer the consequences of that decision." After that incident, I never really talked to him, but he always tried to be buddy-buddy when he saw me in the hallway. Anyway, I eventually leave the dorms and moved off campus for my sophomore year. I had decided to rush a fraternity my freshman year and ended up meeting some really nice guys. I have never been the fraternity type, but I went to a small college where fraternities are a lot different than most places. During my second semester of my sophomore year, my fraternity was taking a new pledge class. One day, I received a text from Julio saying, "One of the guys pledging your fraternity has been caught dealing alcohol to another freshman in the dorms. I thought I would let you know." Turns out, Julio was the dorm leader for a freshman pledging my fraternity and ratted him out to Judicial Affairs as well, thinking the term dealing alcohol was the lamest or funniest thing I have ever heard of. I sent that to our fraternity GroupMe and everyone laughed about it. About a week later, that kid pledging our fraternity came up to ask me about the message I had received from Julio. Essentially, a pretty similar thing happened to him like what had happened to me. Julio found out he had given another kid in the dorm a bottle of wine and reported it to the police. This kid ended up getting a minor in possession and had to speak with Judicial Affairs. This is where the story gets hilarious. In his meeting with Judicial Affairs, the kid pledging our fraternity told the Judicial Affairs guy that his dorm leader, Julio, was now a senior at this point, had texted me about the charges pending against him. Apparently, it's a huge violation to discuss pending charges against a freshman in your dorm to a third party. The Judicial Affairs guy told him that if he could prove Julio was discussing these charges with a third party, aka me, he would receive severe sanctions. Basically, if I sent that text to the Judicial Affairs people, Julio would be in a ton of trouble. So I sent the text that night to the Judicial Affairs people. After that, I didn't hear anything about what happened to Julio, and had honestly forgotten about it. However, nearing the end of the school year in my sophomore year, I saw Julio at the dining hall and came up to speak to me. He tells me a story about how he knows I was the one that ratted on him to the Judicial Affairs, how he ended up getting fired from his dorm leader position, lost the scholarship money his dorm leader job provided him, and overall how crappy his life has been ever since he got fired. After going through his entire sob story, he asked me, "Why did you do that? This could have been handled completely differently. I didn't have to get fired and I could have kept my scholarship money." I look at him dead in the eye for what seemed like 30 seconds and say, "Julio, you made a decision and had to suffer the consequences of that decision." I gotta admit, that was a killer ending. I like how he took the original quote by Julio and he was totally within the rules to do so. So, Friday the 13th happened. It was glorious for all intents and purposes. I ran day-to-day operations for a decent-sized company. We have a president who runs the company in-house. He can be tedious, overwhelming, and an all-around jerk sometimes. Other times, he can be as cool as can be. This was one of the times he was an overbearing, micromanaging jerk. As shop foreman, I take my job seriously with morale. If my guys aren't happy, good product isn't produced. If good product isn't produced, customers aren't happy. Looking towards quality control, it doesn't help when guys are overworked, underpaid, and underappreciated. Friday was one of those days that started out well, but by 6:40 a.m., it had deteriorated into garbage. Note, we officially don't start work until 7 a.m. After this, it was complain about this, micromanage that, and so on and so on. several people being cussed at and belittled. Everyone had had enough. Once in our programming office, the idea was floated by someone that we should just walk out. He can't fire us all. Now, we've all joked about this time after time, but it's never been more than a thought. We grit our teeth and bear it. That day was something different. After getting yelled at again for something out of my control, I finally said screw it. If someone asked if I was in and serious, I said yes. Then it snowballed from there. A total of 20 were supposed to walk out, but due to cold feet, a few using the restroom, only 14 made it. At 10 a.m., we made our move. I told everyone to wait until he would be distracted with a machine, and then we'd all clock out and leave. We all waited. When he was distracted, I gave the roundup signal and everyone left. A few stopped for beer to relax. We weren't intending on going back to negotiate until Monday. We all met at a guy's house and discussed why we walked out, what we wanted, and what our terms were. One thing was very clear. We all came back or no one did. After talking for 2.5 hours and coming to our terms, we decided to head back after a text from him. We were going to corner him, we were going to talk it straight, or we weren't working anymore. The talk lasted almost 2 hours, with both parties flexing their given muscles at some point. But one thing was made clear, things were going to change, or we'd all go look for new jobs. After several people were threatened with being fired, and none being let go, we came to terms that benefited us. For once, our workplace had so much morale. People were excited to work again. We went back to work with a purpose, agenda, and pride. This is the first Monday I've looked forward to work in a year. Even the guys who couldn't come, the people in the main office, we stirred the pot. We've made it known we are not going to go through this anymore. I'll vouch for any of my men, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat. When it comes to almost any job, treating people right is one of the biggest things. It can be high paying, it can be easy stress, it can be whatever, but if people don't feel like they're being treated well, things can go to crap pretty fast. I'm glad this worked out for the original poster and his men. Click the playlist to see more stories. See you in the next video.